Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. As usual, before we get started and while we wait another minute or so for anyone else to arrive, can someone please confirm in the chat, which you should see on that screen, whether or not you can see me, hear me, and see my screen? Brilliant, thank you very much. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm Sam, as most of you know. I think most of you are regulars to these webinars at this point. So I'm the Academy Manager here at Infigo, and I'll soon be joined by Duncan as well, who's part of our support team. How it's going to work is the same as normal. So I'll just be sitting here talking away, trying to throw as much information at you as possible. But if you've got any questions as we're going through the webinar, please use the chat panel to put any queries that you have, and Duncan, when he arrives, will take a look at those for you. And yes, this webinar is being recorded. It should be emailed out, I think, by the Livestorm system upon completion, but it will be put up on the Academy platform as well, so you can review it at your leisure. In that same vein, there is some resources I want to provide you with as well, which will stay available after the webinar has completed, so you'll still be able to use this same link, and I will put it in the chat now. Okay, so this particular webinar is talking about MultiPart products. So, MultiPart products, what are they? It's a bit of a misleading name for what the vast majority of the use cases for MultiPart products are. But once we've gone through this webinar, you'll see why they're named as they are. Most of you, if you've approached the topic of MultiPart products before, will know them more as an upload space. So a place where your customers can just upload a single PDF and then send it through the Infigo system and into your production workflow. So I'll show you an example of like a basic use case that we've got here. So this is just straight out of the box, a brand new MultiPart product created, and you will see, once you launch the product, something like this. So it's a very simple space. It will give you some information on quantities you've selected, attribute values if you've specified them, and you've got a space to upload a particular piece of artwork. Preview it, add it to basket, and then send it through the Infigo system. It's nice and simple. And as I say, that is what most people use this system for. However, there are much far-reaching additional capabilities of this particular type of product. It still falls under that basic umbrella of it's an upload space for your customers to upload their particular artwork into you. However, it can do much more than just allow this one simple space to upload things to our system. So before we really get into how to actually set this up, I'm going to go through a couple more examples for you, just to show you the kind of thing that we might be able to accomplish and what hopefully you'll be able to have a go at once you've started playing around with this system. Okay, so this one, for example, is a versioned product, and this is a MultiPart product. So what this does is it gives you the ability to add multiple different versions of the same piece of artwork. Now, I'll go into this in more detail later on, but what it's essentially doing is just allowing you to have the same specification of a product in terms of the different attributes that you might use. I think most of you will be familiar with attributes, but then you've got the ability to upload different versions of the artwork to the same product. Now, this is very useful if you want to allow people to have the same specification with slightly different artwork. Useful for the end customer because you'll be able to give them things like price breaks, because it would be cheaper if they're ordering 500 labels just with different artwork on the same order line, compared to 2 lots of 250 labels as completely separate order lines, which might go through your system at a higher price. But we'll get into that in more detail later on. The next example along I have is a sample brochure product. And what I want to show you here is another capability of the MultiPart product, which is about combining multiple PDFs into one output PDF. And this is where the MultiPart element of the name comes in. So if I start this process, you'll see with this particular setup, we have a few different upload spaces that we can utilize. So we can upload separate PDFs into these areas. So if I upload a few of those just to show you how this is done. So 3 completely separate PDFs, but then when I go ahead and preview that, it's actually going to show us it. I've used the wrong PDF, typical, to actually upload that, but it's going to show us it as one merged PDF. So all 3 of those separate ones merged into a single product. Now it does have a lot more advanced possibilities as well. So this is a little bit more advanced. It's not something we're going to be covering in a great amount of detail on this particular webinar. I'm just making you aware of its capabilities. So relatively recently, I think, we extended the capability of the MultiPart to be able to do 3D previews, like we can do in Mega Edit at the moment, if you have the correct module available. And what this allows us to do, if I can upload a couple of sample pieces of artwork, it allows us, as we can do with Mega Edit, to actually put this onto a 3D preview of a product. So I'll just keep it nice and simple with one example here. Go to preview. The artwork I've got isn't quite the right size, so it won't look perfect, but it will show you a representation of the kind of thing we can do. So in this case, that particular artwork has been put on one face of this Rubik's Cube. So this 3D model that we have. And again, this is all still as part of the MultiPart product. Okay, so let's have a little look. We have got this build as a product build workshop. So we'll start from scratch and then slowly build up the complexity of our products as we go through this particular system. So what I'm going to do is just go to my product management and create a brand new MultiPart product. So select product type as MultiPart and click create. Now, immediately, that will give us a fairly robust upload system there. So I could go straight to the front end of that brand new product I've created. It's already going to give me an area where our users can upload artwork and then put it in their basket and take it through the end of their system. So straight out of the box, we've got that capability. However, of course, we want to put a lot more detail on there. One thing I will mention before I proceed, if any of you have tried to do this before, maybe some of the older customers with long existing storefronts, you might find that your upload area when you have a new MultiPart product might look slightly different. Now, this is because relatively recently, maybe a year or so ago, the UI for the MultiPart product, the default UI was updated slightly just to make it a bit more user-friendly. So you might see a slightly different version. What we did when that change was implemented, we made it so that any existing storefront still used the old UI by default. and any new storefronts would automatically use the updated UI, because we didn't want to change the existing behavior if it was an existing product. You can, however, change this if you want to use the updated UI. So just to show you where this is, if you navigate to Infigo settings, search in here for MultiPart, and then quite close to the bottom, you'll see Use New MultiPart Editor UI. Now, as I say, for any new storefronts, that will be turned on automatically. This is just a very useful setting for older storefronts that might not be seeing that updated UI. Okay, so there are a lot of essential bits to the MultiPart product, many of which are cross-product type. So what I mean by this is there's a lot of elements you might consider essential on a MultiPart, which are common to all different Infigo product types. So this is things like the ability to completely customize your product landing page. I've just seen that message come in. I don't know whether that's, is anyone else seeing the system where it's me as a very big picture and the screen as a small one, or is it the other way around? It might be on your own system, that one. Okay. Let's see if I can fix that. On my screen, it's the other way around. Okay, looks like it's a bit of a mixed bag. So I think it might be hopefully something that you can control on your end for that one. Oh, somebody's changing it for me now. Is that you, Duncan? Okay, I'm just going to carry on. I think that's changeable on your end, hopefully. Okay. Yes, so stuff which is cross-product capabilities, things like adding attributes, images to your product landing page, descriptions to your product landing page. I'll add a few things of those quickly now, but I think the majority of people on this webinar will be familiar with those. So it's not something I'll dwell too much on. For anyone that's quite new to Infigo and any of these concepts are quite new, we do have loads of information on the Academy on how you would create and implement these things. So what I mean by this is we want the ability to be able to populate things like the product landing page with descriptions and images. And of course, we want to be able to implement things like attributes as well. So what I mean by that on the product landing page, if I go to one of my examples, is we still might want to specify things like here. So if it's a label, for example, as this example might be, we might want to specify different adhesives that are available, different stocks, different finishes. So that might adjust the price, but still we're expecting an upload from our user. So we're still utilizing attributes to define the product specification, but then we pass that over and we allow them to upload a related PDF. So adding some things in there very quickly, we've got things like descriptions, which are on the product details page. We've got pictures that we can upload for our products. I'm just going to pick anything. And then we can go ahead and start to add things like our attributes. So as many of you know, attributes can be added, created separately, and then applied to our products. This is all done in the product variant section. And this is also the same section where you would control things like pricing. Again, like other types of Infigo product, you can control the pricing via basic pricing, tiered pricing, pricing scripts if you want to do it that way. And you can do attribute-based pricing as well. So for example, if some of those attribute values, like adhesive, for example, are slightly more expensive, you can change the pricing structure based on this. This is nothing specific to a MultiPart product. This is stuff which is familiar to many of you for all different Infigo product types. The one exception we have for MultiPart products is the ability to actually put a price in there by uploaded page. And I'll show that a little bit later on. Okay, so forgive me for not dwelling on that bit too much. There's a lot to go through. And as I say, I think a lot of you are familiar with those concepts. So what I want to focus on next is some of the slightly more advanced capabilities outside of just the out-of-the-box MultiPart product. Most of these can be found when you navigate to a product details page for a MultiPart product. So from the product management page, locate your product and then go to edit. To get to the MultiPart specific settings, we're looking for this button, which is on the top right here, called MultiPart config. This will take you to settings which are specific for this particular type of product. But the settings themselves only apply to that particular product you're working on. So I'll quickly walk you through some of the options that are available here. So here, for example, we can see the price per page. So this is a static value, well, a single value of price per page that you can implement, which will obviously update the price based on the amount of pages uploaded by the user into that PDF upload space. You've got the ability to do an output PDF profile. Now, I will cover pit stop profiles in MultiPart products a little bit later on. However, in this case, this is applying a PDF profile to the output that's generated. So let's say, for example, in the brochure example we were doing before, we've already merged 3 PDFs into one. That one PDF is our output. But then we're able to run a pit stop profile on that particular output. So for example, here, I have a very basic example, which I've called grayscale output. I'll show you how to create these a little bit later on. But what that will do when specified in here, so the output will be created, then it will run the profile, which in this case just makes it a grayscale output. So it will just remove all the color. So that's where that's used. That's applied after the output's created. Very briefly skipping over these two as it's not our main focus, but we've got page split setup. If we want, I think that's if we want to do it the opposite way around and actually split into multiple PDFs from one. And then we've got output megascript. So megascripts, we have separate documentation on. It's where you can create customized scripts to perform a whole multitude of tasks within Infigo, but then you can apply your megascripts to the particular product. Now, this opens a big can of worms as to what you can potentially do. So it's not the main focus of this particular webinar. What we'll be focusing on a lot today, which I think if anyone has actually played around with MultiPart products, this is probably what puts a lot of you off. So it's the configuration window. And this is the main place where we're going to be specifying a lot of information to do with the amount of upload areas, the allowable amount of pages in the uploads that people are providing, loads and loads of different things. Now, as I say, that's probably the main thing that puts people off, because as it stands at the moment, this is to be manually specified and manually created in order to get that MultiPart functioning. So we'll spend quite a bit of time going through that today. I'll come back to it. And then scrolling down to the bottom here, we have the ability to do these upload requirements. Now, this leads me on nicely to the next section I wanted to explain and to cover, which is MultiPart products as you are free reign, basically allowing your customers to upload whatever documentation they want, whatever PDF or other file type that they want. If you don't have guidelines or restrictions or various other things applied on there, they could upload whatever. And if you don't have any of these guidelines or checks and balances in place, they could put orders through with completely terrible artwork, which is not going to save you much time, because then you would need to go back to them and you'd have a back and forth trying to get the correct artwork, which is obviously not what we want. There's multiple ways in which we can incorporate these checks and balances. One of those is to give the user some additional instructions as to what files and what format of information is being expected in that particular upload. Okay, so what I mean by this is, so if I go to one of my examples we were working on, you can see we've got some additional bits of information which differ from that out-of-the-box experience. So one is these upload requirements that are over on the left-hand side. So a very clear indication of what the customer needs to do. It doesn't have to just be text. So this can be created using content templates, which will actually put links in there, images in there, downloading various files, whatever you need to do. And I've also got a thing up on the top right here, which allows you to put a sample PDF for your customer to download as well. So let's say you want to give them a template they can work from. You can give them the ability to download a file, which they can use as a reference and make sure that they provide you with compatible artwork. So let's put those in very quickly. So still on our MultiPart config screen, we'll start off with our upload requirements. So that box that was in the bottom left is in yellow. Now we can just do this as rich text editors. We can do it as code mirror, as many of you will be familiar with, but we can also do it with content templates. So that just allows us to build some content. So we can put in text, we can put in imagery. And then that will be immediately available within our upload requirements section on our upload screen. Daryl, I have just seen your question to do with output PDF profile. I will explain that in a moment. They are slightly different with the check profiles and the output profiles. Okay, right. So the other thing we had on here was the ability for them to download that sample file. Now, this is not something which is specific to a MultiPart product in this particular case, but it does make it very useful. It's a useful thing to have on a MultiPart product. So if you want that download option to be available on the top right there to give them a sample file, that is done. So if I go back to my product specification, go to my product variant, and then go to downloadable product. And within there, I have the ability to say has sample download file. I can upload something into there. And then that should now be available when we look at the product. And there you go. And that file can be whatever PDF you like. Okay, let me just reference my notes here, see if I've missed anything. So going back to our MultiPart config page, now is where we're going to start looking at this particular configuration section here, which is probably the bulk of what we need to talk about today. So as I mentioned, this is where a lot of the configuration of the MultiPart is, and it's probably what puts quite a few people off in terms of specifying the details of it. But once you get your head around the structure of it, it's actually quite straightforward. And I've got a little tool I want to show you in a moment, which we've created on a separate page, which will assist you with doing this. But just to explain the structure of this so you understand, what this is doing is allowing you to specify different parts, well, primarily allowing you to specify different parts in your upload screen. So remember where we had 3 different upload areas for different parts of our sample brochure? You would specify these as different parts within here. Those parts each have their own specification, in which is some of it's completed within the part configuration, and then some of it is also completed within the input items. So this allows you to specify certain information related to the parts that you have specified. So to clarify what I mean by parts, let's say with our brochure example, we might have a part which is our front cover. That's one part. We have a second part, which is our internal content. And we have a third part, which is our back cover. When we're actually specifying the part configuration, let me see if I can reposition my screen a little bit better here. Give it some context. So when we're specifying the part section of our config, that is where we get one of these sections here, an area to upload. Our input items, that is allowing us to specify information like how many pages are we allowing them to upload? Is there names and descriptions we want to associate with that? That kind of information. But they are tied in with the parts that we've created. And then the third main section in here is the order. So this is basically just specifying the order in which the parts you've specified are going to be utilized. So basically, it will control how they appear in here for one, but it will also allow us to confirm how they're going to be combined together into one PDF. So if you've got front cover, content, and back cover, you want to make sure that they're combined in the correct order. Otherwise, it's going to be a completely useless output PDF. So that's what this section does. Okay. Now, so asking someone who doesn't have an XML or a coding background to actually go in and write this from scratch is a big ask. Appreciate that. So for this webinar, we put together a small assistance tool. So this is accessible from the page that I've given you. If you just go to this Infigo MultiPart product config builder, that will take you to a separate page on the Academy, which will include this particular tool. Now, before I start going through this, as you can see by the big flashing box there, there is a couple of things to consider when using it. So what this tool essentially does is it tries to provide you with an educational tool and an understanding tool to auto create that config for you. So rather than having to go and manually create the config, it allows you to select options and create the config for you. The idea eventually is that this will be in the software. We don't have that right now. So this tool was put together quite quickly just to be able to provide you with something useful out of this webinar. But as a result, so this has been put together, as I said, for the webinar. It's in beta phase at the moment. So do be careful when you're using it. It's primarily for educational and guidance purposes. You are more than welcome to use what it creates in your own products. However, I would highly recommend that you do thorough testing on that product before you set it to be published, because you want to make sure that the XML generated and what you're using is exactly right before you apply it to a published product available to your customers. So do make sure, if you use it, do make sure that you do some robust testing on what it provides. Before we actually go through step by step what this creates and what kind of thing it does, just to show you how to use it. So all it is a set of drop-down options and checkboxes for different things we can include in that config. Let's say I'll go through this in a moment. And then we have a section to specify different parts that you want to include. And again, parts being things like front cover, internal content, and rear cover. And each of those different part sections will have their own specification as well. Once you've specified options in here, you can click on create, and it will create a resulting XML for you, which you can then copy and paste into your specification for your MultiPart product. Right. So I'm just referencing my notes again here. So what I'm going to do as we're going through this, as I say, it's an educational tool more than anything else. So as we specify options in the tool, I'll keep referencing back to the complete XML that it creates, just so we can kind of see what impact that has had. So first and foremost, when we're creating this XML, is to do with the creation and specification of these parts. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a part to begin with. As you see, that gives us a load more options, which is showing you the kind of information and specification that you can include in those parts. So the first thing we want to do is a name. So let's continue with our brochure example. We'll go for a front cover. With next down, we have a part type. So I'll get onto the other option in here later, but what this essentially allows us to do is either use an uploadable part, so what we've seen so far where a user can upload a PDF, but you've also got the ability to reference a static product that you've got elsewhere on your Infigo platform. So let's say, for example, you're trying to create a new output product, but where the first page is always static. So regardless of what the user uploads, there's always a first page which is always there and it's completely static. You can have it so that one of these parts in the MultiPart just pulls from one of your other static PDF products within Infigo. So very useful. And we've got that in some of the examples that we'll demonstrate. But we'll get onto that static one later on. First of all, I want to specify this upload area. So let's look at some of the options that we can put in there. We can put the page number range. So how many pages do we want to allow that customer to upload? So for our front cover, for example, it might just be one page or nothing. We've got no sort of variation in that. These check and fix profiles are to do with the pit stop profiles. I'll come back to those in a second, I promise. And then further down, we have the UI name and UI description. These are just descriptions that will appear as part of that box for that particular section. Zoom in slightly in case you need to see that. And then finally on here, we have the specification of how many upload areas the user can utilize. So what I mean by this, and I can show it on one of my examples again. So we've got our internal content here, for example, on our brochure. Now, in most cases, it might be that that internal content that people upload is all in one PDF. It's fantastic, that's great. But what if they've got multiple PDFs? What if there's 3 different PDFs that contain the internal content? That option I was just pointing out allows you to put multiple different upload sections within the same part. So you don't have to specify loads of different parts. So for example, if some people uploaded the internals as one PDF, some people uploaded it as 6 PDFs. We want to give them that option. And this is the option we have here. So you see at the moment, I've got one internal content upload. I can very easily add a second into the same part. So now both of those will be combined into the same PDF. And that is this section here. So this upload count type. So we can either specify it as a range. So for example, for our front cover that we're specifying now, the range of minimum is going to be 1 and maximum is going to be 1 because we only want one page. It's only going to be one upload. We can change the ranges, or if we want to give people free specification of how many upload areas to have in that particular part, we can change that to at least 1. How that actually affects our resulting XML. So you can see how a lot of that information has been fed in. And again, this is just to help your understanding of how this is actually constructed. So we look inside the parts section there. We've got some initial configuration for that particular part. So it's user upload. We've given it a name. We've given it a minimum and maximum page numbers. And we've got profiles, but at present, they are empty. We've then got the input items, which is including things like how many upload areas we have and the names that we've specified. And then we have the order, which in this case has only got one item in it. So hopefully you can see how that's being created. Let's copy that and take that over to our product. And have a look at the end result. So I'm just going to paste our updated XML config into here. And then I'll just refresh my product and restart. So you can see there, we've now got our front cover and one upload area that we can utilize. Now, before I forget, you'll see here that I've got a PDF file upload size limit. Now, I think by default, that's quite low. It's something like 5 megabytes. So you might need to change this for some of the products that you create. This is done, if I remember correctly, as part of the Infigo settings that we saw earlier on. So if I search in there for maybe MultiPart again, you can see there we've got an option for MultiPart upload max file size in bytes. So you can change that to whatever value you want. It will be storefront wide. It is a storefront wide value for here. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I'll now talk about our pit stop profiles a little bit. So, very good question earlier on, Daryl. So we've got a couple of different areas that you can specify these pit stop profiles. So for anyone that doesn't know what the pit stop profiles are, it's a way of pre-flighting any artwork that's given to you. So it's not something that's created by Infigo. We just integrate with Infocus Pit Stop. So you can get an integration which allows you to use their pit stop profiles in your Infigo storefront on your products. And what it means is that as the user uploads files to the Infigo storefront, those files are run through a check. And this check can be a multitude of different things: how many pages it is, what size it is, what color formatting it is, and much, much more. And it allows you to make sure that what they're uploading is actually in the correct format. Now, you can do them as a check profile. So this is, as the name suggests, it's just where a check and a report is being created. But it won't actually do any physical changes to the file that they upload, but it will give them information on if they need to change anything. You've then got the ability to import a fix profile. So again, as the name suggests, that if you want to do some automatic fixes on files that are uploaded, if it's required. And then you've got output profiles as well. And as I mentioned earlier on, that's where you can actually specify something that runs on the output file that's being created. Now, in terms of a MultiPart product, there is the two areas where they can be specified. So if you want to use an output PDF profile, which, as I mentioned, operates after the output has been created, that is specified on here. And I'll show you where to create that in a moment. If you want to do a check or a fix profile, or both, those are specified within the XML itself. So either within the tool, if you want to utilize it this way. So as part of your part specification, you've got check and fix profiles, or you can put it directly into the XML under these sections here. So they will be there by default. They're just left empty. But all you need to do is put the name of your profile within here, and then it will utilize that. In terms of where you actually upload your pit stop profiles into Infigo, it's really, really easy. If you just go to your search bar in your Infigo area, admin area, search PDF profile setup, I think is the page you want. And then all you're doing is uploading the profiles into here. Now, as I mentioned, the profiles themselves are created externally to Infigo. It's not our software that creates those. But once you've got that PPP file, which is the pit stop profile, you can just import it into here. Now, I won't go into too much detail on the creation of these, as it's sort of veering away from the topic a little bit. But there is additional resources on the Academy as to how you can upload your profiles and apply them to different product types, because you can get them to run on mega edit products as well. But just for our example cases, to show you how these actually work, what I've got in here is a CMYK check and a CMYK fix. So these are just really simple profiles. One of them is checking that the color format is in CMYK, and one of them is fixing it. So if it's not in CMYK, then it will change it to be so. And what I'm going to do as our example is just get these to run on our particular upload system. So I can do this as part of our tool here. So I'm just going to exactly put those names of the profiles in. So CMYK check and CMYK fix. So you can see those have now been populated, and I'll save that. Now, something to know, which is in the other documentation if you look at it, if you're using both a check and a fix profile, then this is the way you should do it. So your check one goes under the check heading, of course, and then the fix one goes under the fix heading. You have got the option to just use one or the other of those as well. So you can just run a fix if you want and not a check. If you do that, maybe someone a bit confusingly, it doesn't go within the fix profile. Think of these more as a step one and a step two. So if you're only running the fix profile, you'd put the name of the fix profile in here because you don't want to utilize the check. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so let's save those and view that product again. So now what we should find when I upload a piece of artwork is, as we're uploading it, the profile should run. Oh, didn't run. Maybe I got the names wrong. CYMK, that's fine. CM. Okay. Okay, so I'm making an error in here somewhere. But we should have seen that on one of our examples here. So as I was uploading to one of our example products, we had the same thing happening. So as we were uploading the brochure, it would run that check profile or the fixed profile that we had specified. And if it failed, it would tell us so. Or if it was successful, or if it had to run the fix, it will give us a report if we ask it to do so. And that gives us the ability to download that report, or your customer to download the report and see what the test was and see if they need to make any changes. So that's an extra defense against getting artwork uploaded to you and sent to your production system that isn't applicable. So it's going to make sure that you get that applicable artwork. Right, so let's have a look here. So I'm very quickly going to specify another couple of parts in here for our example. So we've got front cover, and we've got internal content, let's say. This one will be another user upload, a much wider range of pages. And we'll allow people to upload as many different PDFs into that part as they want. Now, next, we'll look at one of these static parts I was talking about. So what I'm talking about here is that we have a static PDF product somewhere else on our Infigo storefront. So I know I'm jumping around tabs quite a bit. Hopefully everyone's okay. But I've got a product in here, which I think I call postfix. Don't know if there's a word. That is just a static PDF product with one single page in it. And I'm not giving people the ability just to purchase that product by themselves. I'm not going to advertise it on my storefront. It's just there in the background. But what I'm going to do is reference this particular product in my MultiPart product. So what it will do every time somebody does this and then previews it, it will tag that static PDF onto, in this case, onto the end of the resulting PDF that it creates. So I'm just going to go ahead and specify this in my config construction tool. So I'll just call it postfix. This time it's not going to be user upload, it's going to be a static product. We then need to enter a product ID, which is referencing that particular Infigo product. Now, important note, this isn't the general product ID. I fell for this when I was playing around with it. It's not the general product ID. It's an ID for the specific static PDF product. So I'll just show you quickly how to find that. So just to show you what I mean by the differentiation, if I just go in and edit the product, you can find the product ID, the general product ID, in the top of the in the URL here. So in most cases, our product ID would be considered for this product 2188. But for this particular scenario, we need an ID for that particular static PDF. You can find this by going to the static PDF config And then the ID that you see in here, so 65 in this case, is the one that you want to use in your multi-part configuration. So I'll go with 65. I can put in a description. And then I've got two options here for these parts. You can either put them right at the start or right at the end, as it stands at the moment. They can't be put sort of in the middle of your PDFs, just at the start or at the end. Okay, let's take another look at our config, and you can see how that's being created. So within our parts section, we've now got two user upload parts, and then one part which is looking at our static PDF. We've got more sections in our input items, again, just giving us additional specifications for those different parts. And then we've got the order, where you can see the order in which those are going to be visible on the page or in which they're going to be in the PDF, resulting PDF. So let's take that into our product. And this is where I start to get way too many tabs. So there you can see how we've started constructing here. We've now got two upload areas, but at the moment, there's no reference to that static postfix that we've included. So I can do a single page for this one. I can do up to 300 pages for this one. And then if I go to my preview, what we should now see is a combination of all of those into one PDF. So we've got our front cover, our internal pages, and hopefully the postfix on the end where it's bringing in a product I wasn't expecting. Part of the problem with live demonstrations, so nothing ever works right first time. So I apologize, but hopefully you can see the what I'm trying to achieve here. Okay, I'm very aware that I'm running out of time. So looking at some other things that we're capable of doing within the multi-part configuration, which you can set up within the tool as well. So if you go right to the top of this specification tool, there is a number of global settings. So these are settings which generally appear within the configuration node of your multi-part config. And these are things which apply to the entire multi-part product, not to individual parts. So there's different configurations of things. It's mostly true or false, or just excluding them from the XML completely. It's things like controlling the type of preview that you want to do, specifying whether or not previewing is mandatory, specifying whether or not people have to go through the upload editor at all, or they can just add straight to basket and deal with the artwork later. Just various different yes or no settings, just controlling different elements of the user experience. There's descriptions on there. You can play around with those and see what configurations work for you. What we also have is localization options. So this is very useful for those that have multiple languages working on one storefront. You're going to want it so that if someone's operating their storefront in a particular language setting, they have titles and descriptions that are shown in that particular language. So there's an option in here to facilitate that. So let's just add French, for example. And how that actually gets added to our config is for every single part that we've specified, the UI name and UI description fields will now have a separate localization option underneath, which allows you to put in a particular language string if that particular language is specified on your storefront. So you see, for example, we've got, just going here, I've got a UI description, which is upload interior pages, but then I've got a localization option. So if the storefront is set to French, I can change what this text is going to be so it shows in the appropriate language. And finally, again, a big caveat, it's not recommended for most users. We have a number of advanced options. Now, primarily, this is to do with configuring things like 3D preview or a flipbook preview. It's a bit more advanced. I won't go through these in much detail now through time constraints and the fact that it's a whole other can of worms, a whole other topic. But this is just to give you a feel and an impression for what kind of options are required or available when you're trying to specify different preview types. So for example, if I go to 3D as a preview option, you can see there's a lot of potential different things that we have to specify. Chances are, if you do want to play around with these, you will probably need guidance from the Infigo team. So you can use this for reference. You can play around with it if you want to do so, but you probably will need guidance to implement those. One of the easiest things you can do, just to backtrack on that, is to actually get a kind of flipbook preview, which we saw on one of our examples. Again, it's not quite worked on my live demonstration, but hopefully you get the idea. So this allows you to actually have the sort of flipbook animation that some of you might have seen on static PDF products, for example. Implementing that one does use the advanced tools, but it's quite simple to do so. All you need to do is go to a standard preview, ironically, rather than flip. And then you say force page flip is true. And that will force the preview window into that flipbook mode. So you can play around with that one as well. And that's the only config you would need. Okay, so I'm just checking my my to-do list again. 1 second. Right, so I have run out of time on this. There's a couple more things I want to go through, so I will continue. I appreciate that some of you might not be able to stay, but as we said earlier on, the recording will be available after the webinar and on the Academy if you want to take a look at that. But for those that are able to stay, fantastic. I'll continue and I'll try to wrap up in the next 10 or 15 minutes. So the next thing I want to show is not the config anymore. We've covered as much of the config as I want to at the moment, but I do want to talk about how you would set up these versioned products that I was talking about earlier on. So just to remind you of what those are, this is where you haven't got that upload editor as such that we've seen already. What this allows you to do is actually upload different versions of the same product specification. Now, again, I briefly went through this earlier on, but just to reiterate the sort of main use cases for this. This was primarily implemented actually for more of the label space. So the scenario here is that, let's say we have a customer that wants to order 2,000 labels, but 1,000 of them need to be a certain design, 500 need to be another design, and 500 need to be a third design. Now, in the traditional methodology, they would put those through as 3 different items in the basket, but you might want to offer them price breaks. So you have cheaper production costs if they buy more labels, so you want to pass that on to the customer. In the traditional sense, that would be 3 items in their basket. You might not be able to offer the same kind of discounts in there. However, if you use this versioned system, you'd be able to do all of those 2,000 products or 2,000 items as one order. So they still get the price breaks. However, you've got the different design elements specified, the different designs. You would still use the same specification of attributes. So things like if you had adhesive specified, if you had finishes, stocks, various other things specified, you'd still have the exact same configuration of attributes for all of the products, all of the items, but you can change the artwork. So why this was developed for labels, I think we've seen people implement it in a few different scenarios, so it's definitely got wider applications. Actually setting this up is as easy as just flicking one switch on your product. At the moment, it's only applicable to these multi-part products that we've been talking about. So let me just go to create a new product. The setting for this is going to be on the product variant options. And then if you're on a multi-part product, in here, you'll be able to find this option, which is enable versioning. And in its basic sense, that is all you need to do. So of course, you would apply attributes and landing page information and pricing and whatnot. But in terms of allowing people to upload multiple different versions of their artwork, that's now all you need to do. How that looks from the front end. So I could say, for example, we want to upload 3 different versions of the artwork. We can apply names and quantities. So what did we say? 1,000, 500, 500. If we then click on upload, that will bring up a separate upload window, which your customers can access. And it just gives them the ability to upload separate pieces of artwork for each of those different versions. So, potentially bad example, but I'll just upload different brochure pages just to demonstrate. So that is an upload for version 1. Version 2. And version 3. Okay, so hopefully you can see how that's specified. And then when we add that to our basket, it now displays in there as one order line or one section of the order. However, we can expand that to show the different designs and the different quantities of those different designs. And the pricing would, if we specified pricing on the product, it would be reflected in there as well. Okay, so I'll leave the version products there. There is additional resources on the Infigo Academy if you want to have a look at those. The very final thing I want to talk about here is the ability, again, these are things which are Infigo wide, not specific for multi-part products, but they can be useful. So it's the ability to add additional manual checks on artwork and on products if it's required. So you can have your pit stop profiles. You can have those upload instructions and their downloadable example. But maybe in your first stages, you still want to make sure that you trust the system, or you want to put an extra level of checking in there. It's each to their own. Everyone's got different ways of working. But there's a couple of ways in which you might want to do this, which I can very quickly mention to you and talk you through. One of them is the ability to put a blocker status on any orders that come through your system. Now, this is storefront wide. It's not product by product, so keep that in mind. But what it means, if I just go to the order settings screen, all it is this checkbox here. It sets a blocker status on all new orders that come through. And it means before they get fully integrated into your production workflow, they appear in the Infigo system with a blocker status. It means that your team can go in and check the files that come out of it, make sure that you're happy with it or make any changes if required. Once you're happy, just get rid of the blocker status and it will carry on moving through the system. So if I save that, and then we'll just put that order through, which I've just made. Okay, so what we should see now, assuming I'd saved and set that up all correctly, is that order has now come through as blocked. So that's not gone any further in our production workflow than order being placed and then blocked. But then when we're ready, we can just get rid of the block status and then it will continue through to whatever our workflow may be, whether that's hot folders within Infigo or getting pushed into a third-party MIS, whatever it might be. The other potential option for sanity checking is the approval workflow. Now, this is more of a case of getting some users to check the orders put in by other users, but it is a potential option if you want to add that extra layer of security in the early stages or if your workflow requires it. So again, there's loads of resources on the Academy for approval workflow. It's its own topic, but it is in its most basic form very easy to set up. You go to the approval workflow settings, enable the approval workflow, and then what you do is you assign one or more of your users to have an approver customer role. And then either on a user basis or on a product by product basis, you can say which approvers have to check either which users' orders or certain product orders that come in. So for example, I've got it set up here where we've got per product approval enabled. And then I've got one particular product in my catalog, which is a MultiPart product. If approval is enabled, I can go to this approval tab. And this is just saying that anytime this product is ordered, this particular user, or multiple users if we want, had to approve before it can go through. So it just means just an extra level of checking. How that actually comes through into the system. So you have to be logged into the front end to see this properly. You'd get this approvals tab in the front end. So this would appear for approvers themselves, and any orders that come through which are relevant to them that they need to approve would appear in here. So you could download the artwork, and then you could approve, reject, cancel, whatever you need to do. That's in its most basic sense. There's loads more approval workflow can do. And to reiterate, they are not multi-part product specific. They can be used storefront wide. Okay, I think that's about all I needed to cover today. I hope that's been useful to everyone. I know it's been a lot of information to throw at you, but those resources will stay available. The webinar recording will be available, and so on. Just want to thank you for paying attention and thank you for listening. If you do have any remaining questions, please feel free to put them in the questions panel. We'll stick around for a little while. But apart from that, thank you very much. And we'll have another webinar in around about 6 weeks. So I hope to see you then.